In the glittering ballrooms of Newport, where diamonds sparkled like fallen stars, and fortunes could be won or lost with a single whispered rumor, one man dared to defy the rules that had governed their world for generations. This is the story of a duke who chose love over legacy, compassion over class, and a humble maid over the most sought-after heiress in all of New England. Some say he was mad. Others say he was the sanest man in all of high society. But on that fateful night in 1880, when the champagne flowed like tears and the music masked 1,000 scandals, Alexander Rothschild would make a choice that would forever change the course of American aristocracy. Before we dive into this incredible tale of forbidden love, betrayal, and redemption, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss another story about the scandals and secrets of America's Gilded Age. Like this video if you believe true love knows no boundaries, and share it with someone who needs to believe in the power of a pure heart. Don't forget to save this video to your Watch Later playlist. You'll want to see how this extraordinary romance unfolds. And now, let me take you back to where it all began. Smile not reaching her eyes. In New York, we prefer our servants to be more professional, less familiar. Sarah felt the subtle barb, but merely curtsied and withdrew, her cheeks burning with an emotion she refused to name as jealousy. After all, what right had she to feel anything about the future Duchess? In the weeks that followed, Victoria made several more visits to Rosewood Manor, each time accompanied by an ever-growing retinue of New York's elite. She charmed the Duke and Duchess, dazzled the local society, and systematically began to assert her authority over the household staff, all except Sarah, whom she treated with a cool disdain that puzzled everyone except Alexander, who was beginning to have his own doubts about his fiancée's character. The tension reached its breaking point on the night of the engagement ball, a lavish affair that brought together the cream of New England society. The ballroom at Rosewood Manor glittered with 1,000 candles, the orchestra played Strauss waltzes, and the champagne flowed like water. Alexander, resplendent in his formal attire, stood at Victoria's side, accepting congratulations from Vanderbilts and Rockefellers, Morgans and Carnegies. But his eyes kept drifting to the edge of the room, where Sarah moved among the guests with quiet efficiency, ensuring every glass was filled and every need anticipated. She had tried to excuse herself from serving that night, sensing the growing hostility from Victoria, but Mrs. Blackwell had insisted. All hands were needed for such a grand occasion. As midnight approached and the celebrations reached their peak, fate intervened in the form of a spilled drink that would change everything. The incident itself was simple enough. A slight stumble, a tilted tray, a splash of champagne on an expensive gown. What happened next, however, would echo through the halls of Rosewood Manor and beyond, setting in motion a chain of events that would challenge the very foundations of their society. For in that moment, as Victoria's mask of civility slipped and her true nature revealed itself, Alexander Rothschild would face a choice that would define not just his future, but the future of everyone he held dear. And sometimes, the smallest acts of cruelty can lead to the greatest acts of courage. Victoria Astor's perfectly manicured hand tightened around her champagne flute as she watched Alexander's eyes follow Sarah across the ballroom. The orchestra played a lilting waltz, but all Victoria could hear was the whispered rumors already beginning to circulate. Did you see how he looks at her? They say she saved his life as a child. Isn't she beautiful even for a servant? The diamond tiara in Victoria's golden hair suddenly felt heavy, its weight a reminder of the expectations that came with her position. She had been raised to be the perfect society wife, elegant, ruthless, and absolutely unforgiving of any threat to her status. And in Sarah Collins, she recognized a threat more dangerous than any rival debutante. "Darling," Victoria purred, linking her arm through Alexander's, "shall we dance? Everyone is watching us." Alexander turned to his fiancée with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Of course, we wouldn't want to disappoint our guests. As they glided across the polished floor, Victoria's voice dropped to a whisper only Alexander could hear. "I do hope you'll reconsider keeping that Irish girl on staff once we're married. She seems rather familiar in her manner." "Sarah has been with my family for 17 years, Alexander replied, his tone carefully neutral. She's proven her loyalty countless times. Loyalty? Victoria's laugh tinkled like broken glass. Is that what we're calling it? Before Alexander could respond, the waltz ended, and the guests erupted in polite applause. As they returned to their table, Victoria spotted Sarah approaching with a fresh tray of champagne. A cruel smile played at the corners of her mouth as she formulated a plan that would eliminate this presumptuous maid once and for all. The other guests at their table included Caroline Astor, Victoria's formidable mother, and the undisputed queen of New York society, William Vanderbilt, whose railroad fortune made him one of the wealthiest men in America, and John D. Rockefeller, whose Standard Oil empire was reshaping the nation's economy. Among such company, Victoria knew any scandal would be magnified tenfold. As Sarah drew near, her movements graceful despite the heavy silver tray, Victoria deliberately shifted in her chair, calculating her timing with precision. Just as Sarah bent to serve Mrs. Vanderbilt, Victoria's elbow caught the edge of the tray, sending it tilting dangerously. Time seemed to slow as the champagne flutes teetered. Sarah, with reflexes honed by years of service, managed to stabilize most of them, but one crystal glass tumbled, splashing its golden contents directly onto Victoria's pale blue Worth gown. The gasp that rose from the assembled guests might have been heard across the Atlantic. "You clumsy fool!" Victoria shrieked, leaping to her feet. The champagne spread across her dress like a golden stain, ruining the silk fabric that had cost more than Sarah would earn in 5 years. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Sarah's face paled, but she stood her ground. "I'm terribly sorry, Miss Astor. If you'll allow me to..." "Allow you?" Victoria's voice rose to a pitch that silenced the entire ballroom. "You should be dismissed immediately. This is what happens when we allow inferior stock to mingle with their betters." The orchestra stopped playing, every eye in the room fixed on the unfolding drama. Sarah's cheeks burned with humiliation, but she refused to lower her gaze. She had faced worse in her life than the tantrums of spoiled heiresses. Alexander rose slowly from his chair, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Victoria, that's enough." "Enough?" Victoria whirled on him, her blue eyes flashing. "This creature has ruined my gown, embarrassed me in front of everyone who matters, and you say enough. Perhaps you've forgotten your place, Alexander, or perhaps you've been spending too much time below stairs." The insult hung in the air like a physical thing. The assembled cream of society held their collective breath, waiting to see how the Duke of Westchester would respond to such a public challenge. Alexander's next actions would be debated in drawing rooms and gentlemen's clubs for months to come. With deliberate calm, he removed his jacket and draped it around Sarah's trembling shoulders. Then, in a gesture that defied every rule of their social order, he took her hand in his and helped her straighten from her servant's curtsy. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent ballroom, "I must apologize for this disruption. However, I cannot stand by while a member of my household, no, while a cherished friend, is publicly humiliated for an accident that was clearly not her fault." Victoria's mouth fell open in shock. "Alexander, what are you—" "I saw you, Victoria." His words cut through her protest like a sword. "I saw you deliberately cause this incident." A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Caroline Astor half rose from her chair, her face purple with indignation. "How dare you accuse my daughter?" "I dare," Alexander interrupted, "because I know Sarah Collins better than anyone in this room. She has served my family with unwavering dedication since she was a girl of 19. She saved my life when I was a child, sitting by my bedside for nights on end, when even the doctors had given up hope. She taught me the meaning of compassion, of seeing beyond the circumstances of one's birth to the worth of one's character." He turned to face the stunned assembly, still holding Sarah's hand. "And if I must choose between a woman of supposed breeding who treats others with cruelty and a woman of humble birth who embodies everything noble and good, then my choice is clear." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria stood frozen, her ruined dress forgotten as the full implications of Alexander's words sank in. The most eligible bachelor in New England had just publicly rejected her. Worse, he had chosen a servant over her. "You can't be serious," she whispered, her voice trembling with rage and disbelief. "You would throw away everything, your position, your reputation, your family's honor, for her." Alexander's answer rang out clear and strong. I would rather live authentically with someone who knows the meaning of kindness than live a lie with someone who knows only cruelty. The ballroom erupted in chaos. Ladies fainted, gentlemen shouted, and Caroline Astor's voice rose above them all. This engagement is over. The Astors will not be insulted in this manner. Sarah finally found her voice, pulling her hand from Alexander's grasp. My lord, you mustn't. But Alexander silenced her with a look that held 17 years of unspoken feelings. Don't call me that, Sarah. Not now, not ever again. In the pandemonium that followed, few noticed the elderly figure watching from the gallery above the ballroom. Dowager Duchess Margaret Rothschild, Alexander's grandmother and the family matriarch, observed the scene with keen interest. Unlike the scandalized guests below, a small smile played at the corners of her mouth. As the crowd began to disperse, the gossip already spreading like wildfire, the Dowager made her way through a hidden servants' passage to intercept her grandson and the Irish maid who had captured his heart. Well, Alexander, she said, emerging from the shadows, it seems you finally learned the lesson I've been trying to teach you all these years. Alexander started at her sudden appearance. Grandmother, what lesson? The old woman's eyes twinkled with approval as she looked from her grandson to Sarah. That true nobility has nothing to do with bloodlines and everything to do with the content of one's character. She reached out and patted Sarah's tear-stained cheek. Welcome to the family, my dear. It's about time we had some genuine grace in this household. But even as hope bloomed in Sarah's heart, she knew the battle was far from over. The Astors would not take this insult lightly. Victoria's humiliation would demand revenge, and the full weight of New York society would soon come crashing down upon them. As if reading her thoughts, the Dowager's expression grew serious. Make no mistake, children. What you've started tonight will shake the very foundations of our world. The Astors will use every weapon at their disposal to destroy you both. Are you prepared for what's to come? Alexander straightened his shoulders, looking more like a duke than ever before. I am, grandmother. All eyes turned to Sarah, who stood at the crossroads of her destiny. Would she accept Alexander's declaration and face the wrath of the most powerful family in America? Or would she retreat to the safety of her servants' quarters, preserving the status quo at the cost of her heart? The choice she made in that moment would determine not only her future but the future of everyone at Rosewood Manor. As the clock struck midnight and the last guests departed in a flurry of whispers and shocked exclamations, the real story was only just beginning. Would love truly conquer all, or would the iron rules of society crush this forbidden romance before it could bloom? And what dark secrets lay hidden in the Astor family's past that might explain Victoria's desperate need to maintain her perfect facade? The answers waited in the shadows of the coming dawn, where love and ambition would wage their eternal war. The morning after the disastrous ball, Rosewood Manor buzzed with a nervous energy that set every servant on edge. Sarah awoke before dawn, her mind replaying Alexander's public declaration in an endless loop. Had she dreamed it all? The Duke defending her honor, breaking his engagement, his grandmother's surprising acceptance. As she slipped into her uniform, her fingers trembled while fastening the starched collar. The other maids whispered in the corridors, their eyes following her with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Everyone knew that when the Astors sought revenge, innocent bystanders often suffered the most. In the breakfast room, Alexander sat alone, ignoring the perfectly prepared eggs and toast before him. The morning newspapers lay scattered across the table, their headlines screaming variations of the same scandal. Rothschild heir chooses maid over Astor heiress. Society wedding of the century cancelled. Irish servant girl captures Duke's heart. When Sarah entered with fresh coffee, Alexander looked up, his eyes shadowed with concern. Sarah, please sit down. My lord, I shouldn't... Alexander, he corrected gently. And yes, you should. We need to talk about what happens next. Before she could respond, the door burst open, revealing Duchess Eleanor Rothschild in a state of unprecedented agitation. Her usual composure had crumbled, leaving behind a woman torn between maternal love and societal duty. Alexander, she gasped, clutching a telegram. The Astors have already struck. They've convinced the Metropolitan Bank to call in our loans. Without immediate payment, we could lose everything: the shipping contracts, the railroad investments, even Rosewood itself. Alexander's jaw tightened. How much time do we have? 30 days. The Duchess sank into a chair, her hands shaking. Caroline Astor has also ensured that every other bank in New York will refuse us credit. She's determined to ruin us completely. Sarah rose to leave, but Alexander caught her wrist. Stay, this concerns you too. No, Sarah pulled away, her green eyes blazing with determination. This is exactly why I cannot stay. I won't be the cause of your family's destruction. Sarah, listen to me, Alexander. She used his given name for the first time, the intimacy of it making his heart race. What you did last night was the bravest, most foolish thing I've ever witnessed, but I cannot let you sacrifice everything for me. The Duchess watched this exchange with growing bewilderment. Despite her distress over their financial crisis, she couldn't help but notice the way her son looked at this servant girl, as if she were the sun itself. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Blackwell entered, her usually stern face pale with anxiety. Your Grace, there's a situation in the servants' hall. 2 Pinkerton detectives are here with a warrant to search Sarah's quarters. On what grounds? Alexander demanded, rising to his feet. They claim she stole a valuable necklace from Miss Astor during last night's ball. Sarah's hand flew to her throat. That's absurd. I never... Of course you didn't, Alexander interrupted. This is Victoria's doing. The group hurried to the servants' wing, where they found 2 burly detectives rifling through Sarah's modest belongings. Other servants clustered in the doorway, their faces etched with worry. What is the meaning of this? Alexander's voice carried the full authority of his title. The lead detective straightened, holding up a velvet jewelry case. Your Grace, we received a complaint from Miss Victoria Astor regarding a missing sapphire necklace valued at $50,000. We've been authorized to search the premises. With theatrical timing, he opened the case to reveal an exquisite necklace nestled against white silk, unmistakably the piece Victoria had worn the previous evening. No, Sarah whispered, her face draining of color. I didn't. Someone must have planted it. Save your protests for the judge, the detective sneered, producing a pair of handcuffs. Alexander stepped between them. You will not lay a hand on her. My lord, Sarah pleaded, don't make this worse. Let me go with them. I'm innocent, and the truth will come out. But Alexander had reached his breaking point. 17 years of suppressed feelings, combined with the naked injustice before him, ignited a fierce determination. Gentlemen, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. That necklace was a gift from me to Miss Collins. The detective raised a skeptical eyebrow. A $50,000 gift to a servant. To the woman I intend to marry, yes. A stunned silence fell over the room. Even Sarah stared at him in shock, her protests dying on her lips. The Dowager Duchess chose this moment to make her entrance, leaning heavily on her ebony cane. Is there a problem here, officers? Duchess, the lead detective bowed slightly. We're investigating a theft. What I see, she interrupted, her voice sharp as a blade, is harassment of a member of my household based on the vindictive lies of a rejected woman. That necklace belongs to the Rothschild collection. I gave it to my grandson to present to his chosen bride, Miss Collins. The detectives exchanged uncertain glances. Accusing a duke was one thing, but challenging the Dowager Duchess of Westchester, that was career suicide. Perhaps, the second detective suggested carefully, we should verify this with Miss Astor. By all means, the Dowager smiled coldly. And while you're at it, ask her about the letters she's been receiving from Count Alessandro de' Medici. I believe her parents would be most interested to learn about her secret romance with that Italian fortune hunter. The color drained from both detectives' faces. Clearly, they had stumbled into something far beyond a simple theft investigation. After the Pinkertons beat a hasty retreat, Sarah turned to the Dowager Duchess with wide eyes. How did you know about those letters? The old woman's eyes twinkled. My dear, I've survived 60 years in high society by knowing everyone's secrets. The Astors may control New York's ballrooms, but information is the real currency of power. Alexander seized the moment. Grandmother, will you help us? Not just with this false accusation, but with everything that's coming. The dowager studied them both, her gaze lingering on their joined hands. On one condition: Sarah must prove herself worthy of our name. Not to me, I've seen her character, but to society. How? Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. By showing them that true nobility cannot be bought or inherited. It must be earned. The dowager's smile held centuries of wisdom. And I have just the plan. As night fell over Rosewood Manor, the dowager outlined a daring strategy that would turn the tables on the Astors. Using her vast network of connections, they would expose Victoria's own scandals while simultaneously showcasing Sarah's intelligence, grace, and compassion to society. The Astors think they can destroy us with money and influence, the dowager declared, but they've forgotten that the Rothschilds were playing this game when the Astors were still shopkeepers. We'll fight fire with fire. Deep in the shadows outside, a figure watched the manor's lit windows with calculating eyes. Victoria Astor had not taken her public humiliation lightly. If the Rothschilds thought a fake necklace accusation was the extent of her revenge, they were sadly mistaken. In her hand, she clutched a document that would shake the very foundations of the Rothschild dynasty, a secret so devastating that not even the Dowager Duchess could protect them from its consequences. Would Alexander and Sarah's love survive this ultimate test? What dark secret did Victoria hold that could destroy the Rothschilds? And how far would the Dowager Duchess go to protect her family's legacy? As storm clouds gathered over Newport, the real battle was about to begin. The ballroom of Rosewood Manor lay empty now, the echoes of laughter and scandal lingering in the air like stale perfume. Candles had long since burned down to waxy nubs, and the scent of spilled champagne clung to the velvet drapes. Yet, the tension remained, woven into the very fabric of the manor's grand halls. A storm rolled in from the Atlantic, lightning tracing jagged lines across the Newport sky. It was as if nature itself mirrored the chaos within the Rothschild estate. Alexander stood at the top of the staircase, his gloved hands gripping the banister. Below, in the center of the ballroom, Sarah knelt beside a broken tray, shards of crystal sparkling around her like cursed diamonds. The sapphire necklace accusation had left her visibly shaken, but her spine remained straight, unyielding. The crowd that had returned for the second day of festivities murmured like a disturbed hive. The elites, Vanderbilts, Rockefellers, Carnegies, all exchanging pointed glances, feeding on scandal like vultures. Victoria Astor stood beside the orchestra pit, a triumphant smile curling her painted lips. "There she is again," she cooed, her voice just loud enough. "Our little Irish heroine. What a knack she has for drama." Alexander descended slowly, every step echoing like a drumbeat. With each one, silence spread outward like ripples in a pond. When he reached Sarah, he knelt without hesitation. Gasps erupted, a Rothschild on his knees for a servant. Victoria's voice sliced through the quiet. "Have you lost your mind? You're embarrassing yourself and your name." He lifted his eyes, fire glowing in their blue depths. "The only embarrassment here is how you treat people you deem beneath you." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "You're defending her again? In front of everyone?" He stood, helping Sarah gently to her feet. "Yes, and I will continue to do so." She pulled her hand from his. "Alexander, don't..." But he turned, facing the stunned crowd. "This woman saved my life when I was 8. While others left me to die, she stayed. She held my hand through fevered nights, told me stories when I cried out in fear. She's more family to me than anyone in this room." A scandalized murmur surged. From the back, Caroline Astor emerged, her pearl-studded gown gleaming. "And what of your duty, Alexander? To your lineage? You would throw away centuries of legacy for a fleeting infatuation?" "It's not fleeting. It never was. I didn't understand it until recently, but it's always been there, growing in silence." Victoria scoffed. "You're choosing a servant over me. Do you even comprehend what you're forfeiting?" Alexander turned to the crowd, raising his voice. "Let me be clear. If being a Rothschild means condoning cruelty, preserving privilege over kindness, then I'll walk away from the name this instant." The Dowager Duchess, who had watched in silence from the upper gallery, stepped forward, cane in hand. "You are not walking away from anything, Alexander." He looked up at her, surprised. Grandmother. She descended slowly, every eye watching the formidable matriarch. You speak of legacy, Victoria, of duty and name, but let me remind you, our name was built not only on wealth but on vision, on knowing when to break tradition in favor of something greater. Victoria stiffened. You're condoning this? The Dowager's voice hardened. I'm embracing it, because Sarah Collins has more nobility in her little finger than half the women presented at court this season. Sarah looked like she might collapse. The Dowager turned to her. I once believed birth defined worth, but you've proven me wrong, child. You have dignity, compassion, and the rare strength to endure hatred without letting it corrupt you. That is true aristocracy. Gasps again, but a few heads nodded in cautious approval. Caroline Astor's lips thinned. Then you've chosen your scandal, but don't expect New York to forgive this. Let them judge, the Dowager said. We'll show them something they've long forgotten, honor. The crowd began to disperse, some in whispers of dismay, others in stunned silence. Victoria remained, her knuckles white around her fan. You think this is over? It's just begun. Then let it begin, Alexander replied. Later that night, as the manor emptied of guests and gossip, Alexander found Sarah in the garden, seated beneath the flowering magnolia tree. She didn't turn when he approached. You shouldn't have done it. I had to. You matter more to me than all of them combined. A long pause, then her voice, barely a whisper. Do you think we can survive what's coming? He took her hand. We've survived worse, but you're right to be afraid. Victoria won't stop. And my mother. She'll disown you. He nodded. Most likely. Sarah looked up at the stars. Then let's be brave together. The wind stirred the magnolia blossoms, and Alexander bent to kiss her forehead. But somewhere across the estate a courier slipped through the gates carrying a sealed envelope. Victoria's secret weapon had arrived, and its contents would fracture the very foundation of the Rothschild family. What secret lay within Victoria's hands that could destroy everything? Could Sarah's grace outshine scandal? And what price would Alexander pay for choosing love over legacy? The storm had only just begun. The night wind howled across Rosewood's vast grounds, rattling the stained glass windows and sending cold drafts through the gilded halls. But inside the manor's private study, the air was thick, not with weather, but with tension. Alexander stood near the hearth, one hand braced against the mantel, the other clutching a folded letter. Across the room, the Dowager Duchess sat with uncharacteristic stillness, her cane resting across her lap. Sarah paced near the window, arms crossed, her silhouette lit by flashes of lightning. The letter had come from Victoria. Written in her calculated, elegant script, it was not a plea but a promise of war. Victoria had unearthed something about the Rothschilds, something that would, in her words, shatter the illusion of noble blood. Do you think it's bluff? Sarah asked, breaking the silence. Alexander exhaled slowly. No. Victoria never bluffs. The Dowager looked toward the fire. If she's discovered what I fear she has, then we must prepare ourselves. There are truths even wealth cannot silence. Morning arrived, wrapped in grey clouds. The rumors of Alexander S. public declaration and the Dowager S. shocking endorsement had already rippled through Newport S. elite. Invitations were rescinded, alliances reconsidered, but none of it mattered, because Alexander had made his choice, and now he would make it known. The chapel of Rosewood Manor was small, intimate, with dark wooden pews and stained glass depicting saints and angels. It had once been a place of quiet prayer for the late Duke Rothschild. Today, it became the stage for a reckoning. The staff gathered hesitantly, unsure if they were witnesses or participants. Whispers filled the space. Sarah stood at the back, dressed in her modest housemaid attire, hands trembling. Then Alexander entered. He walked to the altar, turned and faced them all. The Dowager stood at his side, regal as ever. I owe you more than orders and wages, he began. Many of you remember when I was a sickly child, too weak to climb these stairs. You remember who carried me when no one else would. All eyes drifted to Sarah. Sarah Collins didn't just save my life. She taught me how to live, with kindness, with humility. She is the reason I stand before you." Gasps echoed as Alexander stepped down, walked to Sarah, and knelt. A Rothschild kneeling before a maid. He took her hand. "This woman saved me when I was 8. She is worth more than all the gold in the Astor vaults. And today, I ask her, not just to forgive the cruelty she has endured, but to stand beside me, as my equal." Sarah's lips parted, eyes glistening. She whispered, "Alexander, But the moment shattered with the slam of heavy chapel doors. Victoria. She marched down the aisle, flanked by 2 suited men and her mother, Caroline Astor, trailing behind like a storm cloud. Victoria held a thick envelope. "This farce ends now," she declared. Alexander stood. "You shouldn't be here." Caroline spoke, her voice smooth and venomous. "Oh, but we must. You've dragged our names through the mud and we've come to clean it up." Victoria held out the envelope. "This is your family's shame. Your great-grandfather, Isaac Rothschild, was not born into nobility. He was a merchant's apprentice in Bavaria. He forged papers to gain entry into English society. Your entire lineage is based on a lie." Gasps filled the chapel. The dowager stood tall. "We've known for years," Victoria blinked. "We chose not to reveal it, because unlike the Astors, we don't measure worth by lineage, but by legacy." Victoria's expression twisted. "Then let's discuss legacy. The Metropolitan Bank has called in every note tied to Rothschild shipping. Our lawyers will challenge your inheritance. We will drown you in courtrooms." Sarah stepped forward. "And how many reputations will you destroy in the process? Yours included?" Victoria faltered, if only for a second. "You think society will embrace this union?" Caroline scoffed. "An Irish maid and a disgraced heir?" Alexander's voice rang through the chapel. "If they don't, we'll build a new society, one founded not on cruelty but compassion." "Then you're a fool," Caroline snapped, "and you'll die one." She turned and swept out, Victoria close behind. The chapel was silent. Then, softly, the dowager spoke. "Let them come. The truth may bring pain, but it also brings freedom, and we are no longer slaves to pretense." Alexander turned to Sarah. "I meant what I said. I will stand with you, even if it means losing everything." She took his hand. "Then we'll lose it together." That evening the sun broke through the storm. In the gardens under the same magnolia tree where they had once exchanged fears, Alexander and Sarah exchanged promises. They would not run. They would fight. For love, for truth, for the future. But far across the city, Victoria held a final trump card, something she hadn't dared to reveal yet. A birth certificate, with a name that should not exist. Who was the true heir to the Rothschild fortune? What secret from the past could unravel Alexander's very identity? And could love survive a legacy built on lies? The awakening had come, but the reckoning was only beginning. It took less than 12 hours for the story to flood New York like a tempest. By dawn, every newsboy from Wall Street to Harlem was shouting the scandal from the street corners. Headlines screamed in bold black ink. "Rothschild heir defies society, chooses servant girl over Astor empire." The New York Herald. "Duke in love or madness. Servant girl tears apart America's most powerful families." The World. "Irish interloper infiltrates nobility. Will Duke marry below his station?" The Evening Post. Illustrations accompanied the articles. Alexander on bended knee before Sarah. Sarah depicted with exaggerated features and a lowered gaze. Victoria painted as the tragic heiress spurned by love. The public devoured it with morbid fascination. Inside Rosewood Manor, silence reigned. The Dowager Duchess stood in the drawing room, an unread newspaper crumpled in her trembling hand. Alexander stared out the window, his jaw clenched. But it was Sarah who took the brunt. By mid-morning, she was summoned to the servants' quarters. Mrs. Blackwell stood by the hearth, wringing her hands. "I'm sorry, Sarah. There's nothing more I can do. The Astors have made it clear. If you remain here, they'll pull funding from every charitable organization tied to the Rothschild name, even the orphanage." Sarah nodded slowly. "When do I leave?" "Immediately. They sent for a carriage." She packed her things in silence, her few books, a rosary, the worn shawl she'd kept since childhood. As she stepped through the servants' entrance for the last time, a soft rain began to fall. Grand Central Station roared with life. The steel giant hissed and belched smoke as passengers scurried across slick marble floors. Sarah stood near Platform 9, suitcase in hand, her face pale and unreadable. She had no destination, only the instinct to flee. She was seconds from boarding when she heard it. "Sarah!" She turned, and there he was. Alexander, soaked from head to toe, hair wind-tossed, breathless. "You're not going anywhere." "Alexander," she breathed, "you shouldn't be here." He stepped closer. "You're not leaving me, not like this." Tears welled in her eyes. "I've caused so much damage. You've lost everything because of me." He reached for her hand. "You didn't cost me anything. You revealed everything. Everything I had built my life around, titles, expectations. None of it matters. You're the only thing that ever truly did." Her voice broke. "You're choosing ruin." He smiled faintly. "Then let it ruin me, but let it ruin me with you." She tried to look away. "This can't be our life. Running, hiding. I'm not hiding anymore." He pulled something from his coat, a delicate gold ring, simple but beautiful. "I was going to wait, make it proper, ask permission, but I don't want proper anymore. I want real. Sarah Collins, will you?" She stopped him with a kiss. The platform blurred as passengers hurried past, the train whistled, and the city thundered around them. But in that moment, they were utterly alone. She whispered, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They didn't return to Rosewood. They returned to the city. Quietly, discreetly. With the help of the Dowager and a handful of loyal friends, Alexander rented a modest brownstone in Boston. It was far from the opulence of Newport, but it was theirs. Sarah found work quickly. She began teaching English and arithmetic to immigrant children in the Irish Quarter. Her lessons, filled with kindness and strength, transformed a generation that had known only survival. Alexander, stripped of his title and trust, found something better: purpose. He used his connections to raise funds for schools, clinics, and workers' protections. What had begun as rebellion turned into reform. They built a life on principle, on love. But the past wasn't finished with them. One rainy evening, a package arrived. No sender, just a plain wax seal. Inside, a birth certificate, a letter, and a photograph. Sarah read the letter aloud. "If you think you've outrun your past, you're wrong. You're not the only one with secrets, Alexander. Who is Isaac Rothschild? Really?" Attached was a photograph of a woman. Her eyes were unmistakable. Alexander's hands trembled. "That's my mother," he whispered. Sarah's voice was barely audible. "Then who was your father?" Outside, thunder rolled again across the sky. Who had sent the package? What truth did it threaten to reveal? And could the love Alexander and Sarah forged withstand a past built on secrets? The storm was far from over. The bells of St. Patrick's Cathedral tolled noon, their solemn chime echoing through the canyons of Fifth Avenue. The city, buzzing with scandal since the Rothschild Astor split, was holding its breath. No one had seen Alexander Rothschild in public for weeks, not since the train station, not since the newspapers tore his reputation to shreds. And now, against all odds, an invitation had gone out. Not from the Astors, not from any established institution, from Alexander himself. A public statement, a reckoning. Inside the cathedral, the pews overflowed with New York's elite. The Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Vanderbilts, all had come not out of respect but hunger. Hunger for scandal, for humiliation, for blood. Their carriages lined the avenue outside like a parade of vultures. Sarah stood in the back pew, hidden beneath a modest lace veil. Her heart thundered in her chest. She had begged him not to do this. "They will crucify you," she had warned. Alexander had simply replied, "Then let them. But let it be my cross, not yours." The cathedral doors groaned open. Gasps echoed as Alexander strode down the aisle in full mourning coat. Alone, no bride on his arm, no Astor heiress at his side. He ascended the pulpit, turned to face the congregation, and spoke. "Friends, peers, strangers, I know why you're here. not to celebrate, but to witness what you believe to be a fall from grace. But I am not falling, I am choosing. The murmurs started, soft, disbelieving. Alexander continued, voice steady. There will be no wedding today. I will not marry Victoria Astor, not now, not ever. A gasp from the front pews. Caroline Astor rose, pale with fury. You dare disgrace us like this, in front of all New York? Alexander didn't flinch. I dare to tell the truth. I will not live a life built on obligation, on legacy without love. I choose to be free. A woman in the third row fainted. A man muttered, madness. And if that means I lose title, fortune, or respect in your eyes, so be it. I'd rather be poor and in love than rich and chained to cruelty. He looked toward the rear of the church, straight at Sarah. Caroline turned, following his gaze. Her expression darkened. She wasn't alone. Mrs. Rothschild, Alexander's mother, stepped forward, face tight with fury. You shame our name. You shame your father's grave. You disgrace your heritage. Alexander descended the pulpit stairs slowly. I reclaim my name, and if that means giving up what was never truly mine, I will do so gladly. He approached Sarah and held out his hand. Come with me. She hesitated. Dozens of eyes bore into her, but in his voice she heard no hesitation, only truth. She placed her hand in his. Together they turned and walked down the aisle, past shocked aristocrats and scandalized dowagers. Victoria stood outside the cathedral steps, her white parasol trembling. You are a fool, Alexander, and she will ruin you. Alexander paused. Then let her ruin me. At least she'll do it with honesty. The gathered crowd, reporters, passers-by, high society, fell into stunned silence. And then someone applauded. One clap, then another, then a cascade of applause from the streets of Manhattan. They stepped into the sunlight as a pair, no longer prince and servant, duke and maid, but man and woman. That evening, Alexander received word. He had been disowned. His inheritance was revoked, his name stricken from Rothschild ledgers, his property seized. He read the letter quietly. Then he burned it. Sarah watched the flames consume his past. Are you sure? He nodded. I've never been more certain. She stepped beside him. Then we'll start anew. But in the dark shadows of a private club uptown, Victoria sat with a man whose face remained in the shadows. She handed him a different letter, one that hadn't been made public yet. A birth record, a journal entry, and a legal claim. We're not finished, she said coldly. Not until I rip out his heart. The man nodded once. Then let us begin. Who was the man Victoria had enlisted? What was the true nature of the secret in Alexander's bloodline? And would love be strong enough to withstand the next wave of betrayal? They had defied society, but now they would have to survive it. The train pulled out of Grand Central with a long, mournful whistle, carrying Alexander and Sarah away from the only life they had ever known. As the New York skyline vanished into gray mist, neither looked back. For the first time, they were free. Boston greeted them not with fanfare or scandal, but with quiet fog and cobbled streets. It was not the world of ballrooms and banquets, but of dockworkers, factory chimneys, and immigrant families who knew hardship as intimately as breath. They rented a modest row house in the South End, far from society columns and chandeliered estates. Alexander traded his tailored coats for rolled sleeves and ink-stained ledgers. Sarah exchanged silver trays for chalkboards and wooden desks. And together, they began to build something. The first school bell rang on a crisp autumn morning. The building was modest, an old parish hall, donated by a sympathetic priest. The paint was peeling, the windows drafty, but it was alive with hope. Sarah stood at the front of the room, her soft Irish lilt weaving through rows of curious children. Italian, Polish, Irish, German, each of them an echo of her own past. Every letter has a sound, she said gently, holding up a slate. And every sound has a story. In the back of the hall, Alexander watched her with quiet reverence. He'd spent months securing donations, managing supplies, coordinating with city officials, but it was Sarah who gave the place its soul. By winter, they had 3 classrooms. By spring, 6. And then came the knock at the door. Mrs. Blackwell. Her face bore the wear of travel, but her eyes lit up the moment she saw them. I told the others. They're on their way. Weeks later, they arrived one by one. James, the former footman, Ruth, the seamstress, old Thomas, the gardener who once trimmed the roses at Rosewood. They had come not for wages, but for family. Rosewood was gone, but something new was taking root. The school became more than a building. It became a home. The dining room served hot meals. The attic was turned into a dormitory for orphaned siblings. The courtyard bloomed with vegetables, laughter, and music. He coached them in math, mentored the older boys in trades. He had once been groomed to inherit empires. Now he was building one, brick by brick, soul by soul. One evening he found Sarah alone in the library correcting a student's essay. Her hair was undone, her face lit by lamplight. "You're still working?" he asked. She smiled without looking up. He wrote about his mother, said she used to sing to him before the cholera came. He sat beside her. "You've given him a new song." She looked at him then, eyes filled with quiet joy. "We both have." And they kissed, no longer in defiance of society, but in celebration of something greater. Purpose. But peace, as always, is borrowed time. One rainy morning, as Alexander opened the mail, a letter slipped from the pile. The handwriting was unmistakable. Victoria. He hesitated, then opened it. Inside, only one line. "You may have escaped New York, but you haven't escaped the truth." Attached was a legal summons. Victoria had filed a claim in probate court challenging Alexander's lineage, and thus his right to any future inheritance from the extended Rothschild fortune. Sarah found him staring into the fireplace. "She's not done with us," he said softly. "No," Alexander said. "She won't stop until I destroy myself. That's what she's waiting for." Sarah knelt beside him. "Then don't give her the satisfaction." He looked at her. "What if she's right? What if I was never who I thought I was?" That's who you are, and that's a legacy no paper can erase. But across the sea, in a villa in southern Italy, an old man sat in a sunlit courtyard, sipping wine. A letter lay on the table before him, from Victoria, and it held a name that had not been spoken in decades. Who was the man Victoria had reached in Italy? What role did he play in Alexander's hidden past? And how long could the peace of Hearthside last before the shadows came calling again? They had found purpose in exile, but soon they would be forced to confront the past they left behind. The headlines came like thunderclaps. Astor Empire rocked by fraud allegations. Caroline Astor silent as investors demand answers. New York's queen falls from her throne. It began with whispers, rumors swirling through Wall Street about missing funds, suspicious offshore accounts, and forged documents linked to the Astor family's shipping and land development investments. Then came the subpoenas, then the arrests. One by one, the pillars of the Astor Empire began to crumble. The lavish balls were cancelled. The ornate carriages vanished from Fifth Avenue. Former allies distanced themselves like rats from a sinking ship. And at the center of the unraveling storm stood Caroline Astor, now a relic of a decaying dynasty. Victoria, once poised to rule the city's social circles, was nowhere to be seen, but her reappearance would come soon, and in the most scandalous way imaginable. At Hearthside, Alexander read the papers in stunned silence. He sat at the breakfast table, surrounded by morning light and the distant laughter of children in the yard. Sarah entered with tea and paused at the look on his face. "What is it?" He passed her the newspaper. "They're falling." She scanned the front page, brow furrowing. "The Astors," he nodded. "Fraud, embezzlement, offshore laundering. Caroline's personal attorney was arrested yesterday." Sarah sat beside him, stunned. "Victoria?" "Vanished." The answer came 2 weeks later in a scathing article in the Times. Victoria Astor marries European Count, revealed as bankrupt gambler. Count Félix de Marchand, a disgraced nobleman with more titles than coin, had swept Victoria away in a whirlwind courtship in Monaco. Their wedding had been private, rushed, and devoid of Astor endorsement. When the Count's debts came to light, Victoria's last shred of public admiration crumbled. She had married scandal to escape scandal, and it had consumed her. Meanwhile, something remarkable began happening in Boston. The very press that had once torn Alexander apart now turned its praise upon him. Articles spoke of his school for immigrant children, of Sarah's tireless compassion, of the community they'd built from nothing. From duke to director, Rothschild heir builds a new legacy. Love, not lineage. How a fallen aristocrat and an Irish maid redefined nobility. Hearthside, the heart of Boston's future. Letters poured in from across the country, donations, requests for speaking engagements, offers to expand the Hearthside model to other cities. But it was the children who mattered most. One morning, Sarah sat with a girl named Anya, helping her sound out words in English. Anya clutched Sarah's hand. "You're like my mama. She used to read to me." Sarah smiled, heart full. "Then we'll read twice as many stories for both of you." Outside, Alexander was speaking with a visiting journalist. "She was always the strong one," he said, watching Sarah through the window. "I just finally caught up." In New York, Caroline Astor withdrew from society. Her invitations stopped. Her social events were replaced with subpoenas and depositions. The Astor mansions, once the jewels of the Gilded Age, went up for sale. The once invincible queen of Fifth Avenue was no longer welcome at her own court. Victoria, abandoned by her count and hounded by creditors, was last seen boarding a steamship for Europe, alone. The dynasty that had ruled the ballroom now drowned in scandal. In contrast, Hearthside celebrated its 3rd anniversary with music and dancing in the candlelit garden. Paper lanterns swayed in the summer breeze. Former servants from Rosewood and city dignitaries mingled like old friends. The children performed songs and plays in 3 languages. Alexander and Sarah danced beneath the stars, no longer fugitives from privilege, but leaders of something truer. The Dowager Duchess had sent a letter, written in her elegant, spidery hand. "I was wrong about many things, but not about you two. Legacy is not blood, it's what we leave in others. You've left a field of light." Sarah cried when she read it. Alexander kissed her forehead and whispered, "We're not done yet." But peace, once again, was a fragile thing. A telegram arrived late one evening, from Naples. It read, "I have the documents you seek. Come at once. A. de Medici." Sarah's brow furrowed. "That name?" Alexander nodded. "Victoria's old correspondence, Count Alessandro de Medici. He's the man she used to threaten us. And now he wants to speak." Sarah's eyes locked with his. "Are we ready for what he might say?" Alexander folded the telegram slowly. "We have to be. What secrets does Count de Medici hold about the Rothschild lineage? Why has he decided to speak now, and what does he stand to gain? And could the truth threaten everything Alexander and Sarah have built at Hearthside? The Astors had fallen, but one final truth still waited across the sea. 10 years had passed since the day Alexander Rothschild and Sarah Collins left New York behind. 10 years since they chose love over legacy, truth over tradition. In that time, the world changed. Empires collapsed. Fortunes shifted. Names once worshipped faded into irrelevance, but some things, some loves, only grew stronger. The letter arrived on a wind-blown Tuesday morning. It bore an unfamiliar crest, an embossed wax seal stamped with a raven over crossed keys. Inside, the script was elegant, old-fashioned. To Alexander Rothschild, "It is my solemn duty to inform you of the passing of Lord Reginald Rothschild, your great-uncle, whose holdings in Sussex, Edinburgh, and Paris now fall to you as next of kin. A vault in Zurich holds the remainder of his estate, untouched for over 2 decades. Please attend the reading of the will this Friday. Signed, Lord Cedric Wycliffe." Sarah stared at the letter, her breath caught in her throat. Alexander read it twice. He finally murmured, "We're going back. Zurich." A room filled with mahogany and marble. candles flickered against walls lined with portraits of dead men who had worn the Rothschild name like armor. Alexander stood before the solicitor as documents were read aloud. Bonds, estates, gold, art. When it was over, silence filled the room. Sarah squeezed his hand. "You're a Rothschild again," she whispered. He shook his head. "I never stopped being one. I just had to remember what that meant." They returned to New York in spring, but this was no quiet re-entry. The moment their ship docked, headlines exploded. Rothschild heir returns with bride who shocked society. A new era begins, the rise of a different kind of dynasty. Alexander and Sarah were greeted by a quiet entourage, their style modest but unmistakably elegant. No longer scandal, they had become legend. And with them came a vision. The Astor mansion, once the site of cruelty and artifice, now stood boarded and forgotten. Ivy choked the gates. Dust blanketed the once golden halls. Silence echoed in rooms that had once trembled with false laughter. Alexander bought it within a week, not to restore its grandeur, but to redeem its purpose. The blueprints were drawn, builders summoned, glass shattered, then gleamed anew. Walls were torn down, then rebuilt by the hands of those the old Astors would have never let through the door. Within 6 months, the orphanage opened. They named it the House of Magnolia. "For what blooms where no one expects it," Sarah explained to the press. The city was stunned. Children filled the halls, their laughter echoing where once arrogance reigned. The old ballroom became a library. The upstairs suites were converted into classrooms and dormitories. The garden, once decorative, now bore vegetables, fruit, and healing herbs. Hearthside Boston became a model, but the House of Magnolia, a movement. The same families that once shunned them now sent donations. Even old adversaries wrote letters of respect, because something undeniable had taken root. Alexander and Sarah hadn't just survived, they had transformed. One June evening, they returned to Rosewood. The manor stood as a memory in bloom, restored yes, but changed. No longer a fortress of solitude, it was now a sanctuary. And that evening, it would host a celebration unlike any in its history. The carriages arrived just after sunset, not of dukes and duchesses, but of children, Irish, Italian, Polish, now young men and women educated, mentored, and beloved. Hearthside alumni, Magnolia residents, teachers, builders, friends from every chapter of their journey. Lanterns glowed along the garden path. A string quartet played softly beneath the magnolia trees, their blossoms falling like soft snow. Tables overflowed with fresh bread, sweet cakes, and laughter. And at the heart of it all, Alexander and Sarah. He in a simple tuxedo, she in a flowing ivory gown stitched with magnolia petals. As the music shifted, he held out his hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Rothschild?" Her eyes sparkled. "You always may." They danced beneath the stars, twirling through the scent of jasmine and rain, as dozens watched with tears in their eyes. Sarah rested her head on his shoulder. "We've come so far," he kissed her hair, "and we're only just beginning." As the night deepened, fireworks bloomed across the sky. Children sang in 3 languages. Elderly hands applauded as they remembered the fire that once nearly consumed this love and how it now lit the world. And then, silence. Just them, alone beneath the magnolias. He brushed her cheek with his hand. "Do you remember what I said that night? When we stood here years ago," she smiled. "You said you'd walk away from everything to be with me." He whispered, "I'd do it again." The story of Alexander and Sarah Rothschild is not one of princes and servants. It is the story of a boy who found his strength in kindness, and a girl who refused to let the world tell her she wasn't worthy of greatness. It's a love story. But more than that, it's a legacy. One built not on wealth, but on choice. And when future generations ask what became of the Rothschild heir and the Irish maid, history will answer. They built a kingdom of compassion. They raised empires of children. They proved the world wrong. And beneath the magnolia trees of Rosewood, they danced. Because true love knows no class. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful historical romances. Tap the notification bell so you never miss the next emotional journey. Share your favorite moment from Alexander and Sarah's story in the comments below. Save this video to your favorites so you can return to Rosewood anytime. And above all, share this story with someone who believes in the power of love against all odds. Thank you for watching. Until our next tale, stay brave, stay kind, and never stop believing.